Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much. Don't forget about that beaver pond.
No, we're not.
Okay. Good morning, y'all. Thank you, Vaughn, very much. It's great to be here with you. I was just whispering in his ear not to forget about the beaver pond conversation last night. We're going to have to do a land inspection, preferably around duck season at some point. No, thank you very much. I'm so glad to be here. Mentioned my Boy Scout career. I don't claim to be a forester. We're going to hear from some professional foresters in a little bit, but I did get a forestry merit badge when I was Boy Scout back when I was 13. I did get that, so I have that going for me. I'm going to spend a little bit of time this morning talking about, on a positive note, some good things that are coming out of the government. I know that may be shocking to you in this time of chaos and ineffective representation in some areas and in the crazy time we're living in, but there's a group of people that are actually making a difference. And that's the conservative Republican attorneys general around this country. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that in a minute before we go into a really interesting and informative panel. You know, the oath of office that the attorney general takes is just the same one that a police officer takes or the president of the United States, to uphold the Constitution of the United States, of our states, and the rule of law. If you think about it, your prosperity, your property rights, your constitutional rights, your liberties are all based on the brilliant Constitution that we have and the enforcement of the rule of law. So I've said this many times before, politicians come and go. I'm blessed to be in this job. I love this job more than any job I've ever had, but I won't be here forever. The people, men and women you elect to office will come and go, but what prevails is the Constitution and the rule of law. If we lose sight of that, then we're not living in America anymore. Our property rights, our individual liberties, our civil rights, everything else is in jeopardy. So I take very seriously the oath that I took to uphold our Constitution and our laws. I think it's going to endure even through this, what you might call a rough patch in our political history of America. We've always had interesting times in this country, and we're going to continue to have that. So I mentioned the conservative Republican AGs in the country, the colleagues that I get to work with. We go from Nevada to Michigan to Florida to South Carolina, all of Texas, all across this country. Think about, go back a few years to when Jeff Sessions was Attorney General, the first Republican Attorney General in Alabama since the Civil War, I guess. There were 8 Republican AGs back in those days. Now there are 27. Why is that important? It kind of goes under the radar. Fred Barnes of the Weekly Standard and other commentators have called the Republican AGs the last line of defense against an out-of-control federal government. And Senator Shelby mentioned it briefly today, but the world we're living in right now has changed fundamentally from what our founders intended, where we had 3 separate, this is what the 4th graders learn, and we have to remind ourselves all the time. There are 3 co-equal branches of government under our system. We've let that get out of whack, and we've also created a 4th branch of government, which is the regulatory branch. I was thinking about, last night we were talking, if I could have maybe a few days as the President of the United States or as the Speaker of the House or the Attorney General of the United States, think about eliminating 2 or 3 agencies, departments of government in this country and regulatory branches. Think that is a wet blanket of regulations, of red tape that don't achieve really much of any significance except to slow down the economy. If you lifted that burden off of business and industry, think what would happen. Because I don't have to tell you, this is really literally preaching to the choir, but the key to success for our citizens, for our economy, is jobs and opportunity to go to work. When I drive around this state, and I go out of my way, I don't have an airplane or a helicopter or anything, I drive around in my car and I go out of my way to drive in front of the plant. When I go by, I was in Demopolis and Selma the day before yesterday, I drive down and go to the plant gate and all that, because those jobs are critical to these communities. It ripples throughout our state. And when before I took a wrong turn and got into politics, I had a nice, very fun career representing businesses and industries and small communities, cities that wanted to improve, like Atmore and Thomasville, and communities that are out where the main resource that they have for their schools and their churches and everything else are the plants, the property you manage, in the communities around this state. And the cure for poverty and prosperity, key to prosperity, is creating more jobs. And you are fighting every day against things that limit and inhibit your ability to create those jobs. And it's not necessary. It's not necessary to have that kind of environment, to keep that kind of regulatory environment to achieve things we all want. We all want clean air, clean water. We all go hunting and fishing. We love our beautiful state of Alabama. We're going to demand that it be clean and be beautiful, but we can do that without the crushing regulatory burdens that we face. Now that's my "if I were a king for a minute" kind of speech. We don't live in that world, as you know. We live in a world of massive regulations, and you're right in the wheelhouse of it. So that brings me back to the Republican AGs, and what are we doing to try and do something about that? It goes back to what I first said. Our job is to uphold the rule of law and the Constitution. The Constitution devises powers among our governmental officials. It says what the regulators can do. Now remember, regulators, what do they like to do when they come into the office every day? Regulate. Nobody comes into their office and says, "I don't see a need to regulate today. I think I'll just do something productive." They are going to regulate. What rules can we pass? What have we not regulated today? How far can we push the boundaries of our regulations? We look at it differently. The way we look at it is, what does the law say? What power has Congress given you in this particular area? If it's clean air, clean water, or anything else, what powers do you have? And are you exercising those lawfully, or are you exceeding your powers? It has to be some legal reason for us to get involved. Policies are policies, and we have to acknowledge that if you elect a very liberal president and you elect a very liberal Congress, or Congress is not paying attention, you're going to get very liberal laws. You're going to get very liberal appointments to the Supreme Court. That's democracy. We've got to elect more conservatives and more people that believe the way we do. But when the people in office exceed their power and authority, then we have an obligation, I believe, to step in and challenge that, and we do that through the court systems. I added up over 50 lawsuits that we have working together against the federal government. And you know, that's not a bad job description. I get to go in every morning and think of a way I can sue the Obama administration. And that is really kind of an uplifting start to your day. I don't like lawsuits. I'm a lawyer and I can talk about lawyers, but when it's necessary, it's the tool we use, and it's designed to protect all of our rights. So we, through our 27 attorneys general around the country, and through our friends and colleagues like Tom and Chris and this fabulous association, we share notes. What's going on? What is being proposed that impacts your livelihood, your employees, your ability to operate? We want to understand that, so then we can work together. In our own office, as you all know, we have about 150, 200 employees. We have very broad jurisdiction in our Office of Attorney General. We've handled a lot of big cases like the BP case and others. I'm very proud of that work, but the thing I might be most proud of is I've tried to surround myself with people that you would hire, your companies would hire, that I would want to practice law with. Smart, young, conservative, dedicated lawyers to come spend a little bit of time in our office working on these big issues. And I have some of the sharpest young people. Maybe the proudest I am about our office is the people we have. They're the kind of people you would hire. They actually know about the impact of regulations and taxes and contracts and all the things that happen to companies and businesses in the real world, and the impact of government laws and regulations on real world operations. So we try and look at everything through that lens. How does it affect business and industry in our state? So I'll give you one example, and I won't go into all the details because I said we have over 50 lawsuits pending. I could give you, I wrote down several examples, ones that you would care about. One's the Clean Power Plant Rule. It's part of an agenda by Washington to eliminate coal-fired power plants in this country. One of Alabama's greatest assets is its low-cost utilities. We have many assets, including great workers, right to work, all those things that you know about, beautiful communities, but we have low-cost utility prices. relative to other states around the country. That's why people are coming to Alabama. I had the chance before I got into politics to represent Hyundai when they came to Alabama, and they chose Alabama over Kentucky in the final analysis. Now they employ 2,000 people. One of the key issues was our great regulatory energy price work environment, and we need more of that, not less of that. So we joined together with 24 other states to sue the EPA on their Clean Power Plant rule. Courts have sided with us and put that rule on hold, finding that the federal government had gone way beyond its authority in promulgating that rule. You know, if your agenda is to shut down coal-fired power plants, if Congress gives you the authority to do that, you can do that. But you can't do it if you don't have the authority to do that. Just one example, the waters of the U.S. is another one that really gets me. Pretty soon you won't be able to step in a rain puddle without being in the waters of the U.S. All that is as an opportunity for the federal government to extend its regulatory reach into your backyard. And so they will continue to do that until somebody steps up and slaps their hand and says, you cannot do that. The good news is the courts, when 20 or 25 attorneys general from 25 states come into the federal court system and say, this is illegal, we want an injunction, and we're going to challenge this, they have to listen. If it's one state or two states or an individual company, that's one thing. But when you have the power of the states, it's incredible. There's a persuader rule that has to do with unionization I could talk about. Endangered species overreach, the senator mentioned that, and others. I'm hoping Congress will, in this process of political change that we're going through, my hope is that Congress will stand up and exert its precious authority under the Constitution to push back against this regulatory state. But it's almost like Ronald Reagan said, you know, the closest thing to eternal life on earth is a government program, a regulatory agency. We've got to reverse that, and I think Congress has to play a role in it, and I'm hopeful that Senator Shelby and Senator Sessions will get help in doing that. But until they do, we're going to continue to fight along these lines. It also goes back to another hope that I have, is that more of the power that our states and governments have given to Washington will be brought back to the states. If you think about the geniuses that designed our system, our Constitution, and our government, they realized, they knew very well the king and centralized power. They wanted to have power at the local level to the maximum extent possible. Over the years, many, many years, we have given power away to the federal government in exchange for money, in exchange for road money, in exchange for health care money, in exchange for other things. We've given away a lot of our authority at the local level. My hope is that we will start reclaiming that. Governors, senators, elected officials at the state level will start doing that. That would be another way of totally turbocharging this economy and really, frankly, giving us more liberties. One good example of that just brought it home to me, and I had to scratch my head about this one, when somebody came in and said, you know, the Department of Education has decided that every school system in America has to have a transgender bathroom. So I immediately asked my staff, I said, is this a problem in Alabama? I was not aware that this was a problem. And they said, well, we don't think so. Let's check, you know, let's find out. So we called around and talked to the school systems. They said, well, actually, we had an incident that came up, and the teachers and the parents and the students and the kids all got together and they resolved it, and it's not an issue here. So it turns out, number one, it wasn't an issue. Number two, the 99.9% of parents that didn't ever think about that issue are now highly concerned about what that meant. All that is to say, we have joined with a dozen other states to challenge that, and the federal court has enjoined the federal government from issuing that kind of mandate because they don't have the authority to do that. It's not in the law. But more importantly than that, that just gives me a really good example of the kind of thing the founders were thinking about. Those are the kind of issues. What happens in a local school system among students, teachers, and parents? That should be decided by the local teachers, parents, and students in that system, instead of some person in Washington who just got the idea one day that that was a good idea to send that out. Those are the kind of things now that we're dealing with, and my hope is that we'll start going back to some first principles in our government to deal with it. Last thing I'll say before we get to the panel is to echo what Senator Shelby said today. we have been very successful in our role of pushing back against the federal government. We've been to the United States Supreme Court many times, and we've won almost every case. The first example of that, where we didn't win, but we made a difference and we should have won, was the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. The reason that was challenged in federal court was because of the attorneys general challenging it. We think we won the case, although the Supreme Court Chief Justice decided that we didn't. But that's just an example of how we can elevate these issues to that point. We're going to continue to do that. But the court system is on a fine line right now. We have 4 conservatives and 4 liberals, as y'all know, after Scalia's death. What happens in this next election in terms of the court system is going to be critically important, not just for 4 years or 8 years, but for 20 and 30 and 40 years. And it will impact our ability to be successful, not just at the United States Supreme Court, but in the local, federal district and appeals courts over time. That is a very underrated but very important issue that our country is facing right now. So let me conclude my remarks, because we're getting ready to have a panel of fantastic experts, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them. I just want to again tell you how much I appreciate all your friendship and your support, your impact on our state, our communities, where you work and where you live. I'll be traveling through your town and look forward to coming to see your facilities and thanking you again for making such a great difference and for all the help you've given our office. We can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So thank you again. Let's look forward to our panel.